I'm like, oh, I forgot I have planning commission. Dang, I can smell it.
That sounds good.
We just drove by Del Taco and the line was like,
Oh, really?
about
Yeah.
40 cars.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I did one of those instant pot recipes for shredded beef, tacos. They have some really good recipes for instant pot and beef. Hey, Paul, welcome to Planning Commission. Nice to have someone join us who is not one of us. We actually have an audience, one person. Yay. Will Jones was the only one here last week, so.
And his name wasn't on the minutes. Should it be?
Will's?
Yeah.
And
so now Paul's.
I think they're just saying everyone in attendance is remote, so they're not really marking them. It's just people are invited to join the meeting if they have an agenda item, and otherwise they're joining the meeting through YouTube. So good point, though. I didn't know if we list them or not.
Hey, Jane. Couple of questions. I missed a Zoom meeting last week. Do you have some protocols where if somebody wants to speak, is there a hand raise rather than speaking for somebody?
Exactly. So that's what we did. We just kind of raised our hand like that, or you can comment in chat if you want to. And then a lot of the time we just, we left people on mute but then it was a small enough, with just the group that we have here, it worked out pretty well just to unmute yourself if you wanted to speak, just sort of like a regular meeting. So yes, Alan, would you like to?
Question two for Jed and Austin. I can set this up split screen, but are you going to be putting up the agenda and the your talking points on the screen, or do I need to have those on a split screen separate if I want to be looking at those while you're talking?
I will pull them up as Jed or I talks about them, and then so I'll share my screen, and then whatever's on my screen is it'll be basically like the projector kind of functioned in the council chamber.
Worked out beautifully last time.
It did work out well.
Okay, we are up and running and we're ready to go. So.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, welcome everyone to Alpine City Planning Commission for Tuesday, May 5th. We have with us Ethan Allen on Planning Commission. Allen, your last name isn't there. And it's too late. Alan McDonald, it's too late at night for me to think. Alan McDonald, Sylvia Christiansen, and that is it. So we have, and myself, Jane Greiner. So there's 4 Planning Commission members here tonight. And then from the city, we have Jed Muhlstein, who is the city engineer. And we have Austin Roy, the city planner. And Marla Fox is here as the recorder. And welcome to Paul. We will go ahead and start, and we follow the usual protocol. So we will have an opening prayer by Sylvia Christiansen, and then Ethan Allen is going to lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance. Just prior to the Pledge of Allegiance, Austin will share an image of the flag that we can use. So Sylvia.
Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to be together in this new format. We're thankful for the technologies that have made it possible for us to carry on with our businesses and with our business within the city. We ask thy guiding hand to be with us as we represent the people of the city of Alpine, that we will do our very best in doing what is best for the citizens and the city. We're grateful for opportunities to serve, and we are grateful for one another and the efforts that each person puts in. And we say these things humbly in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Austin, do you want to share the flag image, and then we'll have
on the screen here.
You can lead us. And then those who are able to, we did stand. Obviously, Ethan will not be able to.
All right. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance
to
to
the
the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now the next on the item on the agenda is in public comment. If anyone has comment on anything that is not currently on the agenda for tonight, then you can go ahead and bring that forward at this time. Does anyone have anything they wanted to comment on? Okay. All right, so then we will move to our first action item on the agenda, which is the final plat of the Ridge at Alpine Phase 3. And Austin, will you be presenting that, or Jed?
We'll both present it. Austin can start, I'll finish.
All right.
Yep. Okay, so this is the Ridge at Alpine, 72 lot subdivision on 189 acres. So what we're seeing tonight is phase 3 of that project. They're rolling it out in phases. We've already seen phase 1 and 2, with phase 1 having the lot that's up on the hill. Phase 2 is down lower but further north. And then this is phase 3. Phase 3 includes 9 lots. It's on about 6.26 acres. As a reminder, this is in the CR 40,000 zone, so essentially our 1 acre zone. Let me go ahead and just change this, what you're seeing on screen. So this will give you kind of an overview. So you can see here on the screen right now, phase 1, 2, and 3 are shown. As a reminder, phase 1 also included all of the open space, which was dedicated at that time. So there was a conservation easement over part of that. And down at the bottom of the screen here, you'll see there's a area of developed open space, which if you'll recall which some of the planning commissioners will recall from previous meetings, that there was a talk of a soccer field there, / family park. And I think it was decided that it's going to be more of a family park with kind of a peewee soccer type fields there. As far as phase 1 and 2, those were approved back in 2018 and 2019. Looking at phase 3, it's very consistent with what they presented at the concept level when they originally presented back in 2018. The plans haven't really changed on this. I mean, there's been some minor changes, but overall, like the lot shape, where the streets are, all of that is basically the same. And with that being said, the lots do meet our ordinance with regards to area and width. Some of these lots here, you'll see, so the lots range in size, I guess, let me tell you that. So they range in size from 0.47 acres to 0.88 acres. And so obviously those are smaller than our standard for the CR 40,000 zone, but this was done as a PRD. So with them dedicating all that open space as well as the family park, they were granted PRD status. And so because of that, they do have the smaller lots, which are allowed through a PRD. As far as, let's see, this, sensitive lands, it is close to the sensitive lands. We do have some, all of the lots here have to go through the fire chief's approval process. And he basically has a checklist where he'll rate each lot. He looks at them on an individual basis and rates them on a scale, depending on how at risk they are of a fire and stuff like that. So basically it'll be looked at on a case-by-case basis as moving forward. As far as trails, all of those the trails were recorded with phase 1. So there aren't any trails in this phase 3 here. They are still working. Some of those trails are being completed right now. I know part of phase 1 hasn't been fully completed. And so that's one of the things that they're working on to complete at this time. And finally, I guess their plans are consistent with our general plan. And Jed will probably speak more to this, but it does, create a link in between Grove Drive, Elk Ridge Road, Elk Ridge Lane. It all connects through this subdivision. And so they're putting in the final touches on that right now as well. Overall, as far as planning and zoning is concerned, what they're showing here for phase 3 meets all of our ordinances, and I would recommend approval as far as planning and zoning is concerned.
Thanks, Austin. So as Austin mentioned, this subdivision does create a link from Elk Ridge Lane to Grove Drive. Phases 1 and 2 create that link. And phase 3 kind of benefits from the right-of-way and infrastructure improvements that are being built in phases 1 and 2. So as far as engineering is concerned, this subdivision is actually a pretty low-key one as far as putting in extra infrastructure. The frontage for all of the lots in phase 3 is obtained through phases 1 and 2, with the exception of one lot on Zachary Way is the name of it. Zachary Way would be the street. I wish I had a pointer here. Austin, can you point?
We can see your
I
mouse.
can use my
Austin.
mouse, so
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
And
Oh,
if you- it might be helpful if you zoom in just 1 or 2 clicks.
yeah. Show them where Zachary Way
You
is,
lose
Austin.
some size on these Zoom meetings.
Okay,
Yeah.
Zachary Way. Oh,
Whoops.
so Zachary Way.
That's Catherine Way. Zachary Way is the next road south that's going east and west. Yep, that one. So that's Zachary Way, and right there will be one small section of street that is built. The current plans show a hammerhead style turnaround at the end of that street, but that actually doesn't meet our city standards specifications. We require just a regular circular roundabout, and that's more for snow plowing reasons. So that will be one, that is one red line comment we have on the plans. They will need to change that. As far as infrastructure goes though, most of the infrastructure is already built in phases 1 and 2. They will stub out water and sewer and pressurized irrigation in Zachary Way for a future phase. But in terms of storm drain, they are going to complete, this subdivision was required to pipe the Schoolhouse Springs runoff through the development. And they are going to do the grading for that pond right now. And because they're doing the grading for the pond, the Schoolhouse Springs pipe goes right through that pond. Therefore, they need to finish the Schoolhouse Springs piping at the same time while they're working on that pond. I kind of jumped around there on subjects a little bit. As far as storm drain is concerned, that future open space that Austin mentioned, where he talks about they're going to have a developed park there in the future, that also acts as the detention. It's a regional detention pond for the entire development. And that actually needs to be improved and built as part of not only phase 3, but also phases 1 and 2. So they are working on that right now. And they're working on some offsite improvements to make sure that pond gets built right now. In terms of offsite improvements, when they record phase 3, they will need to record easements for those offsite improvements that go through that pond. So that's pretty much a good summary of the utility requirements for phase 3. Let me skim my notes here real quickly. Okay, yeah, that does include, or that sums up all the utility requirements. In terms of hazards, you may remember at the preliminary level, there was some hazard reports done for the entire development. Phase 3 does not include or does not contain any of the lands that the hazard reports talks about. So we don't really need to worry about that, but those reports are still labeled and mentioned on the plat, just so we know that they're out there. In terms of recording, there is a section of our ordinance that says you cannot record another development when a previous phase, when the offsite improvements of a previous phase are not complete yet. Phase 1 had a lot of offsite improvements that were required to go along with it. The big ones are trails. Actually, well, the trails were offsite. Trails and the Fort Creek booster station. The Fort Creek booster station is needed to get pressure and supply more water to this development. That booster station is not complete yet, but they are working on it right now. But according to our ordinance, we cannot allow them to record phase 3 until phase 1 offsite requirements are complete. So that is one stipulation on recording this phase. Besides that, the other items for a final plat is just kind of our standard that we mentioned for all the plats. The water policy is going to need to be met for this phase. There are some red lines on the plat and plans that will need corrected. And the developer will need to provide a construction cost estimate to the engineering department so we can create a bond letter. And I believe that pretty much sums it up. The model motions are there. All the bullet point items are what we have just gone over, but as far as staff's concerns, we would recommend approval with those conditions of approval.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. So the number of lots that this phase includes is 1, 2, 9 lots? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and how many phases is this, just out of curiosity, this subdivision planned in?
That's a good question. I believe the developer, Paul, is also listening in. He could probably speak to that.
Yeah, Paul, do you want to add any other commentary before we start discussing this?
Maybe he's still here.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, Jana, it's a good question on phasing. It'll depend on market conditions. A developer doesn't want to develop too far ahead of the market. So I don't know if there'll be 1 or 2 or 3 more phases from this point on. It'll just depend on market conditions and what we can develop to meet engineering standards by the city and not develop more than the market can allow. Two other things I should mention, just to let everybody know of the status of particularly paving Grove Drive, which then becomes Catherine Way and then becomes Elk Ridge Lane and provides that connectivity through the project. I know the city's been eager to get that connection in. Status is we'll be doing dry utilities this week with curb and gutter next week and paving just 2 weeks away. So we're excited to open up that road for the city and think the residents around this area will enjoy being able to go through the project as a way to get up and down into the city easier. The one question I had really, Jed, and maybe a question for the Planning Commission is between lots 48 and 62 on Zachary Way, it looks like, from a developer standpoint, those lots would really front Elk Ridge Lane. So they would front to the west. And so Zachary Way is really a side yard for both of those lots. And originally we had hoped that we could just do the curb returns and as much pavement would be needed to just turn the curb and gutter and sidewalk at any pavement stub. So the Zachary Way would then be put in when the phase that Zachary Way is included in would be developed. The latest set of plans and the red line comments from the engineering department are requiring a round turnaround for snow plowing purposes, I guess. And I guess I'm wondering, can you educate me on the reasonings behind the requirement from that and why, if they're fronting Elk Ridge Lane, curb returns and are not sufficient there?
Okay, so if there is not enough frontage, and we can look into this, Paul, because You're right. If there is enough frontage on Elk Ridge Lane for lot 48, then we can do exactly what you're talking about. I have the plans open on my computer here. I'm gonna try to see what that curve 3, what is the length of curve 3? Curve 3 is only 75 feet long. Then you have 20 feet, 95. I don't know that you're gonna have full 110 feet of frontage there, Paul. We can look closer at that tomorrow.
Yeah, and so we would, if you don't have that, then we would need to add restrictions to those lots. And the developers or the families on those lots would not have an option which direction. Normally they can choose, as you know, Paul, which street they choose to face, but we would have to put a restriction on the lots if we don't do that. And so it sounds like from what we know right now, there isn't enough frontage, and so that would require that turnaround.
That's correct.
It'll be close, yeah. But Jed could take a closer look at it later, but you
The
got
radius of curve 2 is 15 feet.
curve 2, curve 3, and then looks like there's a 20 feet in between the two of them. 20.18 feet in between.
Actually, I think he might have it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he probably just has it.
Yeah, it's just adding the links there. He might have it. So
Yeah, just
I'm
as
not sure how to. Yeah, I'm not sure how you want to word the motion on that one.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with them only doing the curb returns. If that's the case, then we can't include the right of way of Zachary Way right there in this plat. Because if we record the right of way, you have to pave the road.
right. Okay, so we'll have to think about that. I mean, and Paul, you think it's okay to not, I don't know, if it seems like Zachary Way might, I don't know. I guess that the location of the driveways, it just takes away the option of the homeowner to
It does.
position
It
there.
would limit them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it would limit both lots 48 and 62 if you did that. It would force them to front on Elk Ridge Lane.
Right, which I don't know. Personally, I think that would take, make the value of the lot less and take away some of the possibilities of a homeowner, or a home builder.
Dad, are
Yeah.
you saying there's
Yeah.
not enough frontage on Zachary Way?
No,
No, there's tons of frontage on Zachary Way, but he's not wanting to build that right now. Therefore, he couldn't plat it. So we're making sure he has enough frontage on Elk Ridge Lane, which I think he will. It's going to be really close, though. We would need to double check that. So you could work. You
So is
could work
that-
your motion to go either way.
don't we want the road Zachary Way finished all the way to Elk Ridge so that it connects?
Well, he's not proposing to take Zachary Way all the way to Grove Drive in this phase. So if it's not going all the way to Grove Drive, there's really no point in even
Okay.
having it there, really.
So which street were we mentioning that was going to be so nice to open up the connection to Grove Drive to Elk Ridge? I thought we mentioned that it was going to be really nice with this phase to get that connection.
Wasn't
one-
that Catherine
Yeah.
Way?
Yeah, Catherine, just barely north of this.
Okay.
So Jed, I have a question. And the way it's illustrated on the plat, that wouldn't be so bad to build. I think it's really the round turnaround and all the additional pavement and grading that would need to be put in for the round turnaround is what is just temporary expense. Because the hope would be that we're putting Zachary Way all the way through here pretty soon if market allows, but a round turnaround is just going to be wasted development dollars if it's not necessary. Even the way it's shown right there, if that really functions as a hammerhead turnaround, for a fire truck or a snow plow, if they're, with our permission, allowed to push snow to an area without needing to turn around. That's what we'd prefer. So I guess it's not really that we want these to front Elk Ridge Lane, Jane, because you bring up a great point. It's more that the wasted temporary cost of that round turnaround when there's enough frontage on Elk Ridge not to require it.
So if you're gonna do anything on Zachary Way in regards to lot 48, you need to do full frontage improvements for lot 48 or none at all. So right now you're only showing half lot frontage improvements. So if I were a homeowner moving in, I need curb, gutter, sidewalk, and pavement for my entire southern property line, or none at all. But we're not gonna do half. And if you go the full length, then we run into our stub street ordinance. You're greater than 150 feet, and therefore you're required to put in a temporary turnaround. And the temporary turnaround standard for the city is circular, because our snow plows are not going to push, especially on a downhill, and then be required to back up the street. We require a circular turnaround because they push in a circular motion, letting the snow fall off to the side as they go. So that's what I'm saying. Lot 48, it's, yeah, you either do all the pavement or none of it.
So none of it would mean the frontage is going to be on Elk Ridge Lane?
Yes.
Okay.
And so then someone could develop their home on that lot, but the side of the lot still won't have the curb and gutter and street that's basically going to be there.
Correct.
Eventually. So it's a little bit different now because there's going to be homes on both sides of that street without the street in the middle.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. I actually like the idea of putting all the asphalt and improvements in there right now.
I do too. I don't like the idea of leaving like two lots next to each other and then a road between them that's just not there.
And Paul, you mentioned it's a lot of extra expense. I know it is extra. I don't know if I would say it's a lot.
I'm also concerned about the safety of the citizens too. Like as they walk from home to home and lot to lot, that leaves that section without curb and gutter and sidewalk.
All right, so Jed, are you saying the way the plat is proposed either way, the way it's proposed right now doesn't work either way? It needs to be all or nothing, and right now it's partial.
Yeah.
Jed, does his turnaround have to be finished at the end? Does he have to put curb and gutter around it?
No, just asphalt.
Just asphalt?
Yeah.
Yep. Just paved so that the snow plows and fire engines and things like that can turn around.
So would that be at the south corner of lot 48? Is that what we're talking about right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I guess, so just making a decision on the fly here, I guess we would probably move forward then with the Zachary Way improved along the full side frontage of lot 48 with the temporary turnaround beyond 48.
Okay. Good to know. I think that's important. Okay, so does anyone else, what other questions do the Planning Commission members have? Paul, did you want to add anything else?
No, I think that's it. Thank you, Jane.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Okay, Planning Commission members, what questions do you have on this? Go ahead and take a minute to look through. This is, like you said, there's quite a few things here. So while you're looking through that, one thing I wanted to check on was, are there any other things that are unfinished from the previous phases? You mentioned that we need to have, what was it that needs to be finished? The pump?
The Fort Creek booster station
The
is
booster station? Mm-hmm.
one. There are other improvements in phase one that aren't quite done yet, but I believe those were actually on site. And Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Fort Creek booster was the only off-site that's incomplete.
Okay. And we just need to notate that that needs to be completed before the plat is recorded.
Correct.
So Jed, quick question then, if as a commission, we were to make a motion to approve, what would be the conditions? I made a note that one condition would be that the builder off-site easements for the pond. Second condition would be that Zachary Way would be improved between lots 48 and 62 with grading for the temporary turnaround. Were there other conditions that, oh, there they are, were there?
So the third from the bottom one, the developer addressed the red lines on the plat and plans. The red lines actually include the temporary turnaround. And actually, sorry, the second bullet point also mentions the temporary turnaround. So never mind, you could just spell out that is exactly as written.
Okay.
So if we were to make a motion, would we need to include that the lot 48 needs to have the full frontage improvements?
Or
Is the red line assuming that with our discussion?
yeah, the red lines already include that. You can say that if you want to. It's totally
Just
fine.
to clarify, if somebody wants to mention that, okay.
Yeah, you can.
So everything we've discussed is in these conditions, right? Except the full frontage improvements on lot 48.
Full frontage improvements were redlined on the plat.
Oh, so we don't even have to include that then.
So everything is there. I think we can, Jane, unless you want to.
No, I don't have any further comment. My questions were all answered. So if anybody would like to make a motion, go ahead.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to recommend approval of the proposed ridge at Alpine Phase 3 with the conditions. Away from me there.
Sorry.
Cannot be recorded until all off-site improvements of Phase 1 are complete, unless otherwise approved by City Council. The developer provide a temporary turnaround at the end of Zachary Way that meets city specifications. The developer provide access and maintenance easements for all off-site infrastructure to be recorded with Phase 3. The developer either remove existing buildings or provide a bond for the removal of them prior to recording the plat. The developer address red lines on the plat and plans. Developers submit a cost estimate. And finally, the developer meet the water policy.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second from Sylvia. Okay, any discussion from any planning commission members? Okay, all in favor of this, approving this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. If any disapprove of the motion, say nay. Okay, so it appears that passed with unanimous. And I should mention at this point that 4 members of the Planning Commission being present does consist of a quorum. So we are okay moving forward with these agenda items. Okay, so the next item on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. The next item on the agenda is we're going to discuss the business commercial setbacks. As you recall, those of you who were here last week, Alan, I think you missed that one, but we were discussing some potential changes to the business commercial setbacks because of the number of exceptions that have been made. As part of that discussion, though, we decided that we wanted Austin to also bring forward the sign ordinance, because we felt like the setbacks and the signs kind of went together. If the buildings come closer to the street, what we would do with some of the signage. And so we'll turn the time over to Austin.
Yeah, okay, so just really quick before I get going on this, I'm not sure, did we have a public comment period? I think we might have.
Yes, we did. No, at the beginning of the meeting?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did. Okay. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We don't have any comments. So I just wanted to make sure that we.
Nope. Yes, I did it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So yes. So this is, we talked about this last time, business commercial setbacks. So you asked us to look into what would happen if we allowed the proposed setbacks on a property that's on a corner, and how would that affect the site triangle? And so Jed created this image here. which would show how that would affect the site triangle. And as you can see, if they took the building and put it 15 feet on this street and 15 feet on this street, the corner of the building would go into that site triangle area. And so in order to avoid that, they would have to be at least 17.5 feet setback on either corner. So,
Right. That's great.
you know, so
That
that,
answers that question.
yeah, so that answers that
But
question.
not-
That's a great question.
But not both, Austin? It doesn't have to be 17.5 on
It'd
both.
have to be 17.5 on both sides. Yeah.
It would be.
Yay, I didn't like 15.
Yeah. So that kind of answers that, I think, that we would
Yeah.
not want.
So if it was just a lot in between two other lots, the 15
Sure.
feet might be sufficient. But if it has a lot, it's a corner lot,
Mhm,
we would change our recommendation to at least 17.5 feet.
mhm. Or we could just set the setback to include to be, 18 feet or 20 feet so that we never run into that problem.
Right. Yeah. So it could be greater than that. Yeah, absolutely. So that's something to consider as we discuss this. And then the other thing you wanted us to, I guess we tabled this so that the city council could kind of discuss the sign ordinance. And they were going to consider adopting a new sign ordinance that would make it so signs have to be a couple feet further back from the street. That was not on the last agenda for the city council. They actually pushed it off to the next meeting. So it's going to be on the agenda for next week. So they haven't officially made a decision on that yet. So with that being said, we did add as our next item on the agenda, the sign ordinance to kind of go over that as a discussion point, kind of reevaluate that. I know that's something that Jane's been wanting to look at. And so we have that for our next item on the agenda. But as of right now, the sign ordinance would say that you have a setback of 3 feet for a monument sign. That's a sign that's not attached to the building, but out on the property in the front yard or whatever. That would be called a monument sign. So the current ordinance would say that you have to have a 3-foot setback from the front property line to where that sign begins. The sign, if you do have a monument sign, it cannot, if it's in the site triangle, it cannot be any taller than 3 feet. However, if it's outside of the site triangle, and you'll remember with the Bank of American Fork or Alta Bank, they put that sign just outside of the site triangle, and then they went up a full 6 feet from instead of the 3 feet, which they would have had to do if they were just a few more feet closer to the intersection there. And obviously that was an issue, a lot of complaints, people didn't like it. And if you've driven by the bank recently, you'll notice that the sign is about 15 feet further south and trying to get it away from that intersection, which seems to have helped. I haven't received any complaints about it since then, and I'm aware that the city's received
Is the sign actually up? I only saw the base. The sign is up.
It's fully installed now. Yeah, they did it in a couple phases, so you probably just saw them when they installed the base, but then they came back a couple days later and did the other part. So, if you haven't noticed it yet, then maybe that's a good thing.
Well, it's actually that I don't get out of the house much. I just
Yeah.
go from one room to the other and work and back to another room.
Maybe, yeah, I guess we're all on quarantine.
I need to go for a ride.
So with that being said, I mean, our proposal here is basically, the reason why this is coming before the Planning Commission is we feel like we get so many requests for exceptions on, in particular, front setbacks inside the business commercial zone. Right now, our ordinance says it's 30 feet and 20 feet on the sides, and that the way a lot of our Main Street kind of has a feel. It feels like it should be closer than that. It seems like 30 feet is the standard that we have for our CR 40,000 zone for homes that, 30 feet from the road, which creates a nice front yard area. But honestly, staff, I don't know if that's something we want to see on our Main Street. So, and that's why we're here considering this. Do we want to lessen that setback? And hopefully avoid getting so many exception requests. And a lot of this also has to do with the fact that the way Alpine's been developed over the years. We've had the 30-foot front setback, but all of the buildings that have been built have gotten exceptions. And so it's like our ordinance says one thing, but if you drive down Main Street, it's a different story than what our ordinance says. It has a different feel. So we just want to basically make the ordinance match with what is actually going on in practice.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's open it for discussion for any of the planning commission members to give their opinions on what they think is a good setback for, or if they even want to change it at all. We're considering front setback as well as side.
So I'm sure all businesses are going to want to be as close as they can be as a rule. I would say that if we're trying to be more consistent, it might be nice to be like, 17 and a half or 18 and just do that all the way around, because that would be consistent and it wouldn't be that different from 15. And we wouldn't have to worry about any of the slight triangle that would be taken care of.
Yeah.
That would be my thought.
Okay. Anybody else have?
I'm in agreement with Ethan. I never liked the 15 to begin with. I wanted it to be 20, but 17 and a half is a good compromise.
Yeah. Or, I mean, we could go 18 or we can go 20, anything is open. It's just obvious that if it was a corner, then we'd have to start making exceptions for that. The side, I wanted to ask, on a corner, do both sides have to meet what is considered a front? If it has a side that's on a street, that doesn't qualify as a side.
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, if the side of the building is on a street, we treat it like they have two fronts essentially.
Okay, perfect. That's what I wanted to make sure, that we didn't need to do something different. So because we also need to consider what the side setback is. So the side setback, if it is on a street, then it would have to follow the same as the front setback. And then if it's just two buildings next to each other, if you had like a 10-foot setback, then you would have 10 feet on each side of the businesses, which would create 20 feet between businesses. Currently, it's 20 feet, which creates 40 feet between businesses. Is that correct, Austin? Is it 20 feet right now?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
But we don't have to do 10, like we could do 15 if we wanted to. We could,
Yeah.
we could do whatever we think is reasonable. Given, I haven't looked at the exceptions on the side yards as much as on the front yards. Do you know how many of our current buildings have exceptions on their side yards?
I would say a lot of our buildings are, it depends. So if you go down by the roundabout, we have the developments were done there in what we call a planned commercial development. So they platted the whole like 5 buildings at one time with the parking lot and all of that. And so at that time, they spaced all the buildings appropriately. Those buildings in those planned commercial developments are I would say most of them are probably don't have 40 feet in between each building. They may have, they would have that between neighboring properties, but the buildings that you see there are going to be closer. And then if you move further north on Main Street, you'll come to kind of where we have like J&L Automotive next door, their next door neighbor that used to be the old market. Obviously those are very close. I want to say there's, probably less than around 10 feet or less in between those two businesses. So, it just depends on where you're looking at on Main Street. But I would say in the past, the reason why I think we have the 20 feet is because we also had residential in our business commercial zone. And so I think the idea was we don't want a business too close to a home. And so 20 feet was the standard for the TR 10,000 zone, which is the residential zone in the center of town. And so I think they thought, 20 feet is good. That's what we do in the neighborhood. So we don't want a business too close to a home. And so they decided on 20, and which also happened to be the same in between businesses. But over the years, I would say they've gotten closer. Some of the businesses are closer, but where it borders a residential lot, it's 20 or greater.
What about the fact that we don't allow parking in front of the businesses? The parking has to be behind the business. And so there needs to be enough space to actually access a parking lot behind the business.
Yeah, that would have to do more with frontage. So how wide is the lot is going to determine, how big can I build my building, and do I have enough space for a driveway off the street?
Okay.
Hey, Austin, have you bounced off of the fire chief, the 10 feet plus 10 feet minimum?
The 10-foot minimum.
Yeah, I'm wondering what they think about it.
I believe he's aware of it. In doing our research, I mean, there are other cities where they have essentially zero setbacks in between their business commercial zones. Most cities, in fact, doing the research, most cities don't have side setback requirements in their business commercial zone. There's a few of them, Highland being one of them, which has a 20-foot setback requirement like we do. But Highland has always been a very, that's always been their identity, is a very large lot spread out. That's always been their vision for Highland. And so similar to Alpine, I would say. But as you go to like American Fork or Pleasant Grove or other communities or Lehigh, you'll see that the setback, there just aren't really setback requirements as far as the side setback is concerned.
And so you think that our fire chief is okay with that then? Is that what you're saying?
I would think he is. I would have to check with him, but I would say my inclination would be to say that it would all depend on the building code. Building code requires a certain distance between neighboring structures. For example, you can't have a building right up against another building with an opening. So a window or a door that opens onto a neighboring property would be a fire concern. And so the building code has limitations on how close you can build to the property line. And also, if you are going to build on the property line, you have to have the wall has to be certain fire resistance, and it cannot have any openings. And there's other requirements.
And we have those requirements?
Currently, we follow those. We practice those right now.
Okay, thank you.
I've neglected to mention that John McKay showed up magically at the bottom of my screen. Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for joining. Let's see, what other points of discussion? Alan, did you have anything?
Yeah, just had a quick question for Austin. I understand that the 30-foot setback, for example, the State Farm building is going to be a hardship to put a business or a building on there, because taking it 30 feet off the road is going to leave you no room for required parking in the back. So we continually get requests for exception after exception after exception. In your opinion then, and I apologize if you discussed this a couple of weeks ago, but Austin, in your opinion, what is the right setback that we should be considering and discussing so that we maintain the look of Alpine as it's developed and cut down on the number of exception requests that you get?
Yeah, that's a good question. Looking at that, I mean, as you mentioned, we encourage the way our ordinance has been written is we want the parking to be in back. And so because of that, we probably don't want as big of front setbacks. And with that being said, I would say we probably wouldn't want to go less than 15. So in between 15 to 20 feet, I would say would probably be a good kind of area. I think we need to get a little bit closer than what we're at right now, but I don't think we want to put them right on the street either, because it just wouldn't be consistent with the way Alpine's been in the past. And so I think, 15 to 20 feet is kind of that sweet spot.
So is 17 and a half an odd number to put into the ordinance? Recommend putting into the ordinance?
It's probably weird having a half number in there, but I mean, there's nothing to say we couldn't put that in there.
If we said 20, do you think you would still get a considerable amount of exception requests as opposed to say 15?
I think we would still have requests at 20. Yeah, I think if you put it under 20, it sounds, I think that's kind of the threshold is under 20.
But
I
at
think that makes a difference.
But at 15, based on Jed's diagram, we may get some site triangle issues with monuments or signage or other things, right?
Correct. Yeah, and honestly, there's two ways we could approach that. So we could say, we could just go for an all-out 17 and a half and just say that's the standard, or we could say it's 15 except for corner lots where the site triangle must be taken into consideration, and then they can get it as close as they can, but as long as it's not interfering with the site triangle.
Will you work with these permits and builders and requests? What would your recommendation be?
Out of those options, I would probably, I think it's good to have a number in writing, just because it doesn't leave any gray area. There's no question. It's just like, okay, if we're at 17 and a half, we're good. So I would say a firm number is better than leaving it a little more vague, but I don't know what Jed would think on that.
Are you talking just corner lots or all of them in general? Are you talking about changing
Frontage for everything. We're talking about changing it instead of 30 feet for all lots. We're talking about changing the frontage and the side on all lots.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I was asking just because the amendment is written to where right now it says the front setback shall be not be less than 15 feet, and then it says except for corner lots. So that's why I'm differentiating here. Are we talking all the lots or just corner lots?
Yeah, I think we want to write it so that it's all the lots. And
okay.
I mean, we could, like you said, say corner lots are separate, but it seems to me like it might be nice to come up with a number that is just all lots match this number. And we have a reason why. The reason is because of site triangles. And honestly, I feel like site triangles, even though they're not listed, but as people come in and out of the parking lots, there's essentially a site triangle that is created by the cars exiting the parking lots of businesses onto a street.
Yeah.
And so I like the idea of just saying 18 feet or saying 17 and a half feet, just because that way it will never hit that site triangle, and it will be consistent on a corner lot, or if you have a drive exiting your property.
So I actually like just rounding to 18 feet for two reasons. One, it's just easier to remember, but two, we measure our setbacks to the foundation of buildings. And a lot of times you'll have your foundation that's 2 feet off the ground, but then after that, they go and they'll add rock or brick or whatever. And that's usually not counted in the setback. So it's actually pushing out just a little bit more. So I like 18 just to make sure on these site triangles that we keep the building and their facades out of the site triangle.
That's a good point.
I agree that 6 inches is you're gonna have contractors fudging on that all day long.
Yep.
I guess my thought on that is, and I see Austin's input. I really don't mind, for example, an amendment to the ordinance that set out 15 feet from the property line, except corner lots where the setback shall be not less than 18. It doesn't seem to me like, it seems to me like 15 is reasonable for businesses that are not on corner lots. But it's pretty clear that if you are on a corner lot, however, it'll be 18 feet. I personally like I like the ordinance set out that way, because I think that'll cut down on the number of exceptions requested if it's 15 and 18 instead of just a standard.
Okay.
But that's just my personal opinion.
That's a good point.
And
Think of the aesthetics of it though, Alan. How some of them will be closer to the street and then they'll jump back if they're on the corner lot. Personally, I don't like the thought of that aesthetic. I want them to be even, but that's just the little OCD person in me, maybe.
But they're already not even.
They won't be even anyway, because they'll move them around. They don't have to be that set.
That's true. That's just the minimum. Okay.
And
Yeah,
they're free to build the building however they want. So we don't say it has to be inside this envelope or something like that. So
okay.
Good point. Thank you.
another point, so you mentioned like a lot that's in between two other lots and how there's kind of a visibility, a site triangle issue. So we do have an ordinance for that. Our fences, walls, and hedges ordinance, which is similar to the site triangle thing, would say that within that front 10 feet of a property, and we use this standard in neighborhoods for like driveways, and it's a safety standard for, you know, if a kid's riding his bike down the sidewalk, that front 10 feet, you can't have a fence any higher than 3 feet, or a wall or a hedge or anything like that in that front 10 feet of the property. And so that's already in our ordinance. It's the standard that we have. And so if we're setting it at 15, we're outside of that 10-foot area. That's kind of a safety concern when you're protecting pedestrians and whatnot walking down Main Street.
Okay, thanks. Ethan, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I was just gonna agree. I think that we've done enough. We required the businesses to having the parking in the back really does make them want to push these buildings forward as far as they can, because they need that space. So I think we should do as much as we can to help them do that.
Okay. John, did you have any comment you wanted to make on this item?
I like what Alan and Ethan
Okay.
referring. I think a 15-foot standard with the 18-foot side triangles
Okay.
works.
And what do you think about the side? Do we want to go with 10 foot on the side? I'm not as concerned about the side, but
Yeah,
That's a really big change.
it is. It's a very big one. I mean, this is cutting the front in half and the side in half. But like the premises of this is that that we're granting exceptions for every single building.
Yeah. And another point I'd like to make is the intention I think of this too is we want to be forward thinking. What do we want Main Street to look like in the future as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you could go with 15. You don't have to go to 10. What do you guys think? What is the advantage of the side yards? The advantage of the side yards is it just spreads the buildings out a little bit, makes it look like individual stores or homes versus like the look of American Fork where they just go one right after the other. Because the city isn't designed that way already. The only thing that looks like that kind of is Alpine Market and the auto shop.
Some businesses might need a little extra to get their landscaping requirements.
That's right. They still have to meet the landscaping requirements anyway. And so we don't want to put them in the position where if they do the minimum setbacks, there's no possible way of getting the landscaping, but they will have to change their building, but then they'll want an exception on landscaping. Yeah. Any advantages, Austin, that you want to point out on side yards?
Side yards, I just think it's a business zone, and I think to have them, all of the best business zones that I've seen, you know, that planners always recommend that always have the highest ratings.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a much closer, more intimate kind of a business area. When you start spreading things out, it creates, you know, it's kind of like State Street in Orem.
It's not walkable.
People don't want to be walking around and it's just not as comfortable for a person.
You know,
so
I should mention that, you know, as they did the Gateway Historic planning booklet, one of the visions they had was a walkable downtown area for Alpine, was a friendly, walkable downtown area. You know, they had thought of, you know, maybe benches under trees and things like that, I think was kind of a little bit of the vision of the farther setback. But I think having businesses closer actually makes them more walkable than having them, you know.
Yeah, walkability is big. Another point, if you put them closer together and you get more businesses in a smaller area, it actually raises the value of that area. Instead of having just one or two businesses, you now have 4 businesses, and it's a more valuable area.
Okay, well, if anybody has any kind of a motion they want to make or any other points, let's,
All right, I can make a motion.
okay.
So, so I think we want to, I would make the motion that we approve this amendment with the front setback being not less than 15 feet from the property line, with the exception of corner lots where the setback shall be not less than 18 feet from the property line on all streets. And no portion of the setback area adjacent to the street shall be used for off-street parking. And then in the commercial development adjacent to other commercial areas, the side yard and rear yard setbacks will be not less than 10 feet unless recommended by the Planning Commission and approved by the City Council or circumstances justify. For a commercial zone abuts a residential zone, the side yard and rear yard setbacks will not be less than 20 feet unless recommended by the Planning Commission and approved by the City Council where circumstances justify. A lot occupied by a dwelling structure shall comply with the setback recommendation requirements set forth in TR 10,000 zone unless recommended by the Planning Commission and approved by the City Council where circumstances justify. Accessory buildings shall be set back not less than 5 feet from the main building.
Okay, we have a motion for the sample wording. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, second was by Alan. Okay, so any questions? Does anybody want to discuss that? Okay.
What was the motion worded that we are approving or recommending approval?
It should be recommending approval.
Yeah,
so if it's not, we'll.
He did say approve.
You can amend what I said. So.
Okay, all right. You accept the amendment of changing the wording to recommend approval?
Yes, recommended approval.
Okay, so John Mackey has made the recommendation or restated the motion, I guess. I don't know how we have to do it these days with the wording of recommend approval. So, and it's been accepted. So all in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Aye. Nay. All opposed? Nay. Okay, so that passed unanimously as well. Okay, so let's move to the sign ordinance for our discussion on that. Let's see, what page does that start on?
38 of the packet would be our sign ordinance. And so this, I mean, we're just bringing the whole sign ordinance here for discussion. So to kind of give you a quick, in a nutshell type of a thing. So we have our general standards for signs, which is the first part of the sign ordinance. And that basically, talks about the standard setbacks, which would be 3 feet behind all sidewalk. And unless there's no curb there and no sidewalk, then it would be 12 feet would be the general setback for a sign. And then also here, so you'll see this sentence here, and we've been talking about this all night at the bottom of page 38. No sign, permanent or temporary, in excess of 3 feet in height shall be placed within the site triangle or on any corner lot. No part of any sign shall interfere with the use of a fire escape, exit, stairway, ventilator, or window. So obviously, I mean, safety is always a concern when it comes to that, and that's what the standards cover. It does go on to then outline our sign permitting process. So you have to get a permit to get a sign, to do a sign, and that includes, we have 2 different kinds of signs, permanent signs and temporary signs. So a permanent sign would be, something that's fixed to a building. It's meant to be there for a permanent basis. A temporary sign would be like an A-frame sign or something of that nature, that, to advertise something. And so we have different standards for temporary versus permanent signs. And then with regards to permanent signs, as you continue on and flip the pages here, you'll see that we have standards for varying types of signs. So commercial building signs, if it's on a building, it can basically, it can only be a certain percentage of the building. So 15% of the area of any side of any building can be signs. So you can't just make the entire side of your building a sign. We max out at 15% of that side of the building can be a sign.
And how is that monitored? Is that through inspection process or?
So what we require is when someone, they'll have to fill out a permit, and in their permit application, we make them include elevations for the building. So they'll have a profile view, they'll show the front of the building, they'll show the side of the building, they'll show all four sides. And then on each side, they have to show a calculation on the side that shows how much of what percentage of that part of the building is being taken up by sign.
Okay.
And so we make them basically show their work and prove that it's less than 15%.
Do you have any issue with people complying to that or just putting signs up without coming to the city?
A lot of, to be honest, it's probably 50-50. Half of the people come in and get their permit, and then the other half, I guess they just don't think they need a permit. So we usually catch them when they're installing it or after the fact, and they're like, did you get a sign permit? And they're, no, we didn't. So
okay.
It can be, and it has been an issue that we deal with.
Okay.
Luckily,
we might want to bring that up in the discussions when people come forward with their commercial buildings, when they come forward with their plans to Planning Commission. We should probably make that a more prominent part of the discussion so they actually are aware of it.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because honestly, we've had a couple of new buildings go in the last few years, and it's not part of their site plan approval process. So it's not something that we are required they're required to look at up front. So maybe that's something to consider. Maybe do we want to see these signs earlier in the process instead of after the fact?
I think we should personally, just because that way, we just nip it in the bud right at the beginning to understand where their sign is going to go and what the requirements are for it personally. But
yeah, I mean, the way our ordinance is written right now is all of the sign ordinance, it just basically takes that out of the Planning Commission and City Council's hands and just says, okay, staff, you deal with that. We got more important things,
for sure, yeah.
And so I think the way it was written right now was to avoid having too many things on the agenda. But if you feel strongly enough that it could have a huge impact on the way a building looks. So if that's something that you felt strongly enough about, maybe that's something that we want to change. I don't know.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that.
I'll just quickly summarize the rest of this. So we also have standards for what would be real estate and construction development signs. So, like the Rigid Alpine, they have big signs. They're trying to advertise their subdivision, and we do have specific regulations for those. And we've had issues with some developers in the past, and we've had to make them comply with that. And then we also have our temporary signs, which I've already mentioned. And, those are smaller things, like if a business is having a promotion or whatnot, that's usually when we see those temporary signs, or during election season, we see all the election signs. Those would be considered temporary signs as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell what our ordinance covers. There's also electronic message display signs, which essentially the only entity that's allowed to have one is a school, according to our ordinance. Surprisingly, we do allow neon signs up to 2 square feet in size, but they have to be inside the building and just displayed through a window.
Yeah.
So,
I think one of the points we wanted to discuss was number 5 here, these monument signs being 6 feet high and is it like 9 feet wide or whatever? I missed where that went to.
8 feet wide.
8 feet in width. the thing that we were discussing is if we allow the buildings to be 15 feet away from the street, is an 8-foot monument sign necessary? The building is closer already, and then 8 feet is more than 50% of their frontage. So that was one of the reasons I think we were discussing this too, is that in the example of the bank building, the bank is already really close to the street, and then they have the maximum size sign. So, okay, thoughts, everybody? What kinds of things did you want to talk about as far as on the sign ordinance?
I guess my biggest concern with signs, recently I've been seeing a lot of very bright signs, very well lit, really too well lit. So where they're distracting, and even to driving, into the point where they're distracting you when you're driving down the road. So that's probably my biggest concern with the sign, is that it's not be so bright that it distracts from the surroundings.
Mm-hmm. Well, and most of the businesses in Alpine, people are pretty aware of them. I had one question though, before we go too far into this. What exactly is the Planning Commission considering? Like, so that we're not, what is it that they want to consider? They want to move it farther away from the parking strip. What were they saying?
The idea, so you're talking about the Alta Bank situation?
No, you said the planning,
City council.
You said the city council was already considering something.
Yeah, so the city council, basically, they want to avoid having another Alta Bank situation where you have this big sign that's blocking visibility on an intersection. And so their discussions have been based around, do we want to make it so that signs aren't so tall? For example, across the street from Alta Bank, there's the Madsen and Madsen attorney office, and they have a sign out in front there. I think it's 5 feet. It's a foot shorter than the Alta Bank sign, but no one seems to notice that one, even though it's, pretty close to the side triangle as well. And so, some of the things they wanted to look at were monument signs, and is the setback great enough, and do they really need a sign that tall in that area?
Okay, go ahead, Alan.
So, but that's an interesting point, Austin. I think that is the point, right? Is that with Alta Bank, there were a lot of concerns raised by the public because that a large building pushed right up against the sidewalks, right, with as little setback as they could get away with, right into the triangle, and then they wanted to put up a big monument. You juxtapose that with Madsen and Madsen. I mean, that's just an old house that's pushed, geez, that thing's probably 30, 40 feet off the road with a big yard. And so, I mean, honestly, my perception was, oh yeah, their monument sign is way smaller than Alta Bank, but it's actually larger, right? But I mean, it's not really an issue because they're so far off the road that you don't, and there's so much yard or grass there that you don't really even consider their monument as being, any size issue with it. So
it's like you can see around it.
Yeah, you can see around it. So I guess I'm just a little bit, with Sylvia, where I don't know if you're asking us to come up with some recommendations ourselves, or if Austin, you want to give some thought to this and come back next time with recommendations for us to consider and recommend adoption of the city council. I mean, what is it that we're supposed to?
Alan, he put this on the agenda because I asked him to, because I wanted us to discuss it, because it seems to be an issue that I think should be modified. And so that's kind of what it's here for, is just, what do you guys think? Do you think this should be modified? Personally, I do think it should be modified. I think
it goes along with our change in we changed the setback. So I think you can go ahead and change the size of the sign, because now there's less space for that sign.
Exactly.
So if we were going to give Austin some guidance, then would we say that to some degree it may be conditional, the size of the monument sign, for example, if we're discussing, number of signs, would we want to say that, you know what, to some degree, it's contingent upon the setback of the building? Because if somebody is, for whatever reason, they got a ton of room, they have no parking issues, they want to set back 20, 25, 30 feet, it would probably not be unreasonable to have a little bit larger of a monument sign. Whereas if somebody is right on the 15 feet, for example, we discussed today, then you know, a 6x8 monument sign would probably be unreasonable in that circumstance.
Well, that's a good point. And we could do something like, you know, based off the setback of the building, that, you know, the sign could be 30% of that or something like that, with a maximum of 8 feet or something along those lines. You know, I don't know. We could think about some different ways of wording that. We could take the monument signs and just say, you know, we don't want a monument sign wider than 6 feet wide instead of 8, and 4 feet high, or, you know, something along those lines. And also question, what do you guys feel about, I thought for a long time that Alpine didn't allow lighted signs. Am I wrong? Did they change that? I guess you guys are new. Maybe Jed, you were here then, but didn't they used to have no lighted signs because the bank actually had an old wood sign? And
Man, I don't recall.
Okay. I think they used to have an ordinance and then they switched to allow the lighted signs, but I don't know how you go about saying that we think your sign is too bright, or that, like with the Alta Bank sign, they have the one symbol in the center and it's just this big, huge white, you know, which I think is why it's one of the reasons it's so distracting. But
So I know the ordinance says something about a shadow being cast by the light at a certain distance.
yeah.
I often think that is totally not enforced in any way.
Yeah. How in the world would that?
Yeah. Seems hard to understand what you would do with that.
Yeah. Well, maybe what we should do is, now the city council, do they just bring forward an ordinance to be changed? Would that ever have to come back through us if they voted on something this week, or do they just vote to change the ordinance?
So next week's, they're actually going to be looking at the setback for signs.
Okay, just the setback.
Yeah, but that being said, they haven't seen this ordinance to reduce the setbacks for buildings in the business commercial zone. So that might, that might change their perspective on how. So
I'm just wondering if you should talk to them before and find out what they would want to do, because we would like, I get the feel from all of us, and you guys can tell me if this is right, but that we would like to modify the sign ordinance. And so as we propose these setback changes for them to look at, that we would also like to consider changes to the sign ordinance, and they could make recommendations, and then you could come back to us with some proposed changes based off of their opinion and what you've heard us say tonight. Does that sound like the correct path we would go to do this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so they'll be discussing it a little bit next week. So, and then they'll be seeing the previous ordinance that you just recommended. So when that ordinance is mentioned, I can just say, you know, the planning commission also had a discussion, and some of these were the topics, and they'd be happy to take another look at the sign ordinance if you'd like them to, or so we could.
Yeah, just tell them that we are interested, that we would like to make changes to the sign ordinance based on the recommendation of the setbacks changing and the size of monument signs, that we would like to review and make some recommendations for changes to the ordinance.
Yeah, and that can be mentioned in next week's meeting.
Okay, because I hate for us to go through and make a recommendation when they're already discussing it in the next meeting. It seems like we should get their feedback and hear what their discussion is before we go and propose a new ordinance without taking that into consideration.
Agreed, and it seems like that's somewhat contingent upon them.
Exactly.
the recommendation that
Right.
we've made. And if they do, then, okay, great, it's probably time to revisit the sign ordinance.
Yeah. And I'll plan on attending city council. I had not prior to this last week been receiving the notifications about city council. And so I honestly kept forgetting it because I wasn't getting the packet and everything. So I'll attend city council next time so that I can add any commentary or let them explain if necessary.
Okay. Yeah, and Jane, I think I made sure that you were added to that. So let me know if you don't.
Yeah, you did.
email.
Okay, no, thank you. So any other comments that you guys would like considered out of the sign ordinance, so that as Austin tries to put something together for us, he includes things that we care about? The setback of the signs is one thing, the size of monument signs, the width and the height.
I think those are the things that are being affected.
Okay, and potentially, as Alan mentioned, considering the size of the sign potentially being variable based on the setback that the actual building is, because I think he brings up a really great point. If somebody chooses to do a 30-foot setback, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, but is there visibility underneath the sign in Madsen and Madsen? Do they have a base and then some poles and a sign above it, and so there's a gap where you can actually see through, or is it solid?
No, it's solid. You're thinking of the old Bank of America Fork sign. That did have an opening underneath.
Okay, and the Alpine City. Okay. Anyway, so potentially considering the setback in proportion to the size of the sign, I think is something else to think about or maybe investigate. Could you guys think of anything else you want to have him look into? Okay. So are we okay to move on to the next item? Does anybody want to have any further discussion on this? Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the discussion on exceptions. We're going to consider charging a fee for exceptions. The question was, you were going to check with David Church to see what he thought about that, to see if that would minimize exceptions or that could potentially cover the cost of exceptions which require additional staff work.
Yes, so I did my homework on this. I met with David, our city attorney, and basically one of the things when I asked him the question, he's like, well, it sounds like the way that you're approaching this, or the planning commission wants to approach this, is are we penalizing people for asking for an exception? And he was quick to say that we don't want to be punishing people for asking an exception. So we have to be careful not to cross that line. It can't be some kind of form of punishment or a penalty. But with that being said, we are able to charge a fee if we see fit. However, that fee can't be an excessive amount. We can't make a profit on it. It just has to be basically, what is the cost of processing this? And so it'd be a fairly minimal fee if we were to charge a fee for exceptions. Just the cost of actual service, or if there was a processing, if we had to process the application or whatever that fee would be. So ultimately, kind of his recommendation was, if we feel like we're getting so many exceptions, and we may want to just consider changing the ordinance to so that there aren't either A, we don't allow exceptions, or B, we change it so that they don't feel the need to ask for an exception. And he thinks that would be the more appropriate way to reduce setbacks rather than just trying to slap a fee on it.
Okay. So because an exception should be granted when there is some unusual circumstance based on the lot or something. And so he's saying that we want to avoid punishing someone because their lot is a strange shape or something like that. I don't have really strong opinions on charging a fee for an exception. So what do you guys think? What's everybody's opinion on if a fee should be charged, or we should recommend it, I guess?
I wish I could remember why it even came up.
I think
fee.
actually, Jessica brought it up. Jessica Smewen brought it up. We were discussing how many people are coming for exceptions for the setbacks. And she just said, you know, for the amount of extra time and extra work, would there be a reason to charge to cover the extra work? And would that essentially be a deterrent? Would that make it seem like a little bit more of a formal process? Like, well, maybe I'll think twice before I do an exception. I have to go fill out this application. I have to meet these things and I have to pay this fee. Would that cause people to pause before they just come for every exception that they want? So
were we discussing that there was just too many exceptions?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Weren't most of those exceptions regarding setbacks? Haven't we addressed that?
Well, we have. So this would be any exceptions. So, you know.
How
So we
frequently
have-
are we getting those?
Yeah, this was for all exceptions. And if you remember right, the reason why the item was on the agenda was because we wanted to talk about a possible criteria for exceptions. Like, do we want to have a checklist that we require everybody to go through a checklist before they are even allowed to ask for
Right.
it?
That's right. And we decided against that because we felt like that would make people feel entitled. Like, well, I checked everything off the box, so now you have to give me my exception. And we decided that rather than do a checklist, we'll just stick with the current process and address each of them as they come. Is that correct? Do I remember that right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So
if David Church thinks that that it would be wrong to charge a fee that's causing a penalty, that was our thought. That was the reason we were doing it.
Yeah.
That would seem to nullify that as a valid reason to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So is everybody okay with dropping that idea? Anybody else want to pursue it further or discuss it further? Okay, let's just move on. All right. So thank you. That was good. I think that is the last item on our agenda. The next item we have would be communication and then approval of the minutes. So any communication? Anything we need to know about? We're planning on doing Zoom meeting for the next planning commission meeting until further notice still.
Yeah, so I would participated in a meeting that the mayor had with the city manager and the fire chief and police chief and a few doctors in the area. And they talked about, you know, the COVID-19 situation. And essentially, it sounds like we're going to be continuing the way we've been doing things for a while still. So, so right now, no change in the way we're doing things.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we'll plan on that.
Does anybody know what kind of impact COVID-19 has had on the citizens of Alpine?
As far as spread in the community, I don't know if it's been big. I know that there's been a couple of officers that have had it. And then
police officers?
Police officers, yeah, there was an officer and then one of the officers. So the first officer got it because one of his family members had traveled to a region that had it. And then he got it from them. And then he was training a new officer who also got it. One interesting fact is that the trainee didn't show, they tested him. He didn't show any signs of it for the first, I want to say it was 12 or 13 days. And then on the 12th or 13th day, he showed that he tested positive. So it just goes to show that it has a long incubation period.
Very interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. We don't have any deaths in our city that anyone knows of based off COVID-19. That's great. And it seems like the citizens are doing a pretty good job. Although Snow Oasis is open and they do have their 6-foot lines, and people do seem to be sort of standing in clusters on those lines, but it's kind of funny to watch. So, okay, well, with no other communications, then do we have a motion on the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
It's your job.
I think it's gotten expected at this point.
I know it has. It really has.
I'll be in southern Utah next time, so you know. I don't know if I'll have internet access or not.
Okay. All right. Did you formally make a motion? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yes.
Okay, so Sylvia's made a motion that we approve the minutes. Is there a second? All right, so that was a second by, sorry, was that John?
That was Ethan.
Ethan.
Oh, it was Ethan. Sorry, I'm looking to see which screen gets lit up. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? Nay. Okay. That's approved. So I think we are done. We can adjourn, and I don't have a hammer, so we're done. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.